Dear all, I'm very happy to see you here in Yerevan. We are starting our next panel, which is dedicated to China, Russia, India triangle. We will speak also about territorial disputes, and we will try to understand bilateral relations between Russia and China, bilateral relations between India and Russia, and also we'll try to understand which role these countries are playing in Eurasia and which kind of strategies they have here. I will start, and I will speak about Russia's greater Eurasian partnership strategy. I will introduce aims and prospects. Russia is the largest country in the world by far. It stretches from the Pacific to the Arctic Ocean and the Barents Sea across a vast sweep of land, two-thirds in Asia, a third in Europe. Its strategic location, rich natural sources, world-leading nuclear arsenal, and one of the strongest armed forces of any nation gives the Russian state its authority and geopolitical muscle, providing Moscow the opportunity to play an important and influential global role, more significant than its economic size outside of the top 10 might imply. Historically, Russia has been a unique force of globalization. In the 20th century, as the leading country of the Soviet Union, it tried to spread communism in the world, creating a bloc of socialist nations. After the collapse of the USSR at the end of 1991, Russia's next major integration project was the Eurasian Economic Union, launched in its current format in 2015. The grouping brings together former Soviet states, including Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, with Moldova and Uzbekistan as observers. Cuba too has observer status. In the short period of time since its establishment, the Eurasian Economic Union has signed free trade agreement with the Serbia and Asian members, Singapore and Vietnam, and an interim accord with Iran. Free trade negotiations with Cambodia, also part of ASEAN, are ongoing. The overarching mission of the Eurasian Economic Union, however, is to drive economic cooperation and integration in the Eurasian continent. To this end, in 2016, Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed the Greater Eurasian Partnership, which aims to consolidate related integration projects from Vladivostok to Lisbon. But what lies behind the Greater Eurasian Partnership? What are the opportunities it offers and the obstacles that could hamper its implementation? What political and economic benefits can the concept provide to Russia and its fellow Eurasian Economic Union members? The Greater Eurasian Partnership strategy, let's speak about it. The Eurasian continent is home to different civilizations, nations, states, and organizations, which not only cooperate with each other, but also compete or even clash their contradictory interests, leading in the past to bloody wars. Russia and the other Eurasian Economic Union members are geographically and logically the main bridge between Europe and Asia. But after the end of the Cold War, lingering incongruity between Russia and Europe have prevented any serious integration between European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union and its precursors. There are, for example, differences over norms of the world order, the Ukrainian crisis, the political tensions in Belarus, human rights and democratic values, among other matters. Tensions between Moscow and Washington have also been impeded to closer our matters. After all, the EU and the United States have deep economic relations and strongly aligned strategic interests underpinned by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization alliance, which reaches right up to the borders with Russia and Belarus. US sanctions on Russia in response to Russian activity in Ukraine have limited the EU's room for maneuver. Russia's differences with the EU have been the main obstacles to Moscow's making headway with the Greater Eurasian Partnership to its west. Instead, it has pursued its own pivot towards the east, where its overtures may be more welcome. For Russia, turning eastward means greater interaction with China, as well as stronger relations with India and ASEAN, and opportunities for cooperation with Japan and South Korea. Let's also speak about Russia and China. Let's speak about their shared interest. In this era of shifting world order, Russia and China have deepened ties based on a range of shared interests. The two countries need each other. Moscow provides energy and natural resources to China's vast market. China also requires Russia's modern weaponry. Beijing and Moscow regard each other as strategic partners in the struggle to counter Western dominance and promote a multipolar world as an alternative to the US-dominated liberal rules-based international order. In 2015, Russia agreed with China to integrate the Eurasian Economic Union and the Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing's signature foreign economic policy. 3 years later, in Kazakhstan, the agreement on trade and economic cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union and the People's Republic of China was signed. This accord set out a roadmap for joining together the Eurasian Economic Union and the Belt and Road Initiative. In September 2020, in a speech delivered by video to the Eastern Economic Forum, Chinese leader Xi Jinping stressed the importance of deepening this collaboration. A key forum for facilitating this goal has been the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes Russia and the Central Asian states such as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Also, India and Pakistan are also members, while Iran's bid to join was recently accepted at the last Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in Dushanbe in September 2021. The Greater Eurasian Partnership Framework is also meant to enhance further the harmonization of Eurasian Economic Union integration projects with the Belt and Road Initiative. Both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Greater Eurasian Partnership serve as platforms for resolving differences and contradictory interests among participating countries. The relationship between China and India, for example, is especially fragile. The two non-Western powers engaged in bloody border battle last year. Given its role as a strategic partner to both, Russia could play the role of mediator, as it did after Galvan Valley clashes. Moscow is able to bring Delhi and Beijing together in the context of multilateral cooperation under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And BRICS recently is a good position to connect the triangle given its key role in India's international north-south transport corridor and its desire to integrate the Eurasian Economic Union and the Belt and Road Initiative. Russia so have good position. Of course, Russia and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization cannot solve all the problems between New Delhi and Beijing, but the Greater Eurasian Partnership could prove a useful vehicle for promoting joint economic projects that will build trust and a stronger spirit of cooperation. Let's also speak about exploring about economic opportunities with Japan and South Korea. In its eastward turn, Russia also harbors ambitions of deepening economic partnership with Japan and South Korea. Again, geopolitics have proven an obstacle. The long-running territorial disputes between Moscow and Tokyo or Kuril Islands and the strategic alliance of the two East countries with the US, American troops are also in Japan and South Korea. This all making some problems between relations between Russia, Japan, and South Korea. Russia, in turn, stages military exercises with China and supports Chinese naval operation in Asian waters, just as the US does with South Korea, Japan, and other partner countries. The rebooting of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or so-called Quad, by the US, Japan, India, and Australia has generated some consternation in Moscow because Russia's long-time strategic partner India has joined what is widely viewed as a partnership designed to contain China, with which Russia is deepening its strategic links. Moscow is trying to resolve or at least mitigate its dispute with Japan by proposing joint development projects in the Russian forest. In a plenary session at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok in September, Vladimir Putin, Russian president, told participants that Russia is ready to provide special investment opportunities to Japanese companies in the disputed islands. So we will see what will be the reaction of newly elected Japanese prime minister. Russia has also sought to conclude a peace treaty formally to end World War II hostilities between the two countries as a way to de-escalate tensions and open the way to deepening collaboration and full involvement of Japan in the Greater Eurasian Partnership Initiative. Japanese companies could provide financing and technology. Washington, however, is likely to oppose such rapprochement as the US regards Russia along with China as its security threats. Indeed, the US could prove to be the spoiler of Russia's overtures to the east, especially if Moscow and Beijing edge closer. The US and the UK and Australia have announced the AUKUS cooperative alliance aimed primarily at developing an Australian nuclear-powered submarine program and sharing defense and military technology. AUKUS could drive Beijing and Moscow to build a military technology cooperative arrangement of their own. And when there is the North Korean security challenge, in response to Pyongyang's missile test, the US in 2017 deployed its terminal high-altitude aerial defense anti-ballistic missile system in South Korea, arguing that the move was only meant to protect its ally. But of course, Moscow and Beijing have viewed this as a threat to their security and have pressed for the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. The North Korean problem is a problem for Russia's hopes to foster closer economic ties with Seoul and to attract South Korean investment to its Far Eastern region. The US is not a Eurasian power, but its influence across the region is stronger. Washington will likely use its own partnership across the region to thwart implementation of the Greater Eurasian Partnership, in the same way that it has been critical of the Belt and Road Initiative and sought to offer alternatives such as the Quad's Infrastructure Development Program and GEO's Build Back Better World Initiative. In Eurasia, Turkey, a NATO member, could play a key role in counterbalancing Russian and Chinese initiatives. With Ankara's help, Washington may try to edge Russia and China out of Central Asia and the South Caucasus. In the 44-day Artsakh-Karabakh war last year, Turkey helped Azerbaijan in the fight against Armenians in the region. This opened Turkey's road towards Central Asia. The Turkish may seek to step up its regional profile by taking advantage of their political, linguistic, and cultural affiliation with the people of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan. Central Asia will be a crucial region for promoting Eurasian Economic Union and Belt and Road Initiative for harmonization. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan that has led to the return to power of the Taliban, who have declared the country an Islamic Emirates, has raised further concerns since Beijing and Moscow about instability in the region and risk to the Eurasian Economic Union and to China's plans for a China, Central Asia, Western Asia economic corridor, which is integral to the Silk Road economic belt. Russia, China, and other Shanghai Cooperation Organization members will likely land on Pakistan, which has significant influence on the Taliban. Beijing could also neutralize the threat by offering economic assistance to Afghanistan for peaceful integration focused on trade and investment. The implementation of the Russia-led Greater Eurasian Partnership from Lisbon to Vladivostok has potential to contribute to peaceful development of this strategically important yet underdeveloped region. It is no secret that the economic and political center of gravity in the world order is shifting from West to Asia. The Indo-Pacific region will be the global hub of economic growth. Cooperation and harmonization of the economic projects of the European Union, Eurasian Economic Union, Belt and Road Initiative, India, and ASEAN will bring socio-economic and political benefits to all states of Greater Eurasian continent, even if geopolitics causes disruptions. Perhaps the model of such a modus vivendi is the relationship between China and Japan, Both sides have serious political grievances, but they have nonetheless sought to develop a working relationship, giving priority to bilateral trade, investment, and people-to-people exchange. The US and some of its allies and partners are casting the struggle to strengthen the world order as a contest between the democracies and autocracies, and there are many of both in the Eurasian continent. The key to preventing conflict and promoting prosperity, peace, and stability will be to focus on trade and investment that will be mutually beneficial to all stakeholders' countries. Russia's proposal of the Greater Eurasian Partnership is constructive, but it is still concept with many steps required to make it reality. All sides should create cooperative institutions or platforms for dialogue that will allow Eurasian powers to meet and discuss disagreements and to find ways to settle problems peacefully. A key objective should be to plot roadmaps for creating economic, transportation, and other cooperative networks and links to connect and integrate the Eurasian continent. While the building blocks for Greater Eurasian Partnership project are in place, it is not clear which states or institutions should finance them. A Greater Eurasian Partnership Bank is indeed to address this challenge. Strengthening infrastructures, interconnections, and providing the financial resources for developing Eurasian economies should be the top priority. Interested parties should explore ways to harmonize digital projects of the Eurasian Economic Union, EU, China, India, ASEAN, and our players in Eurasia, especially given that the pandemic has served as a powerful catalyst for digitalization. The globalization of Greater Eurasia must continue. Indeed, it cannot be stopped even by the disruptions and disputes that are the hallmark of today's great power geopolitics. I have finished my presentation, and Alexander Korolev will continue. We will wait for him, and it is my pleasure, it is my honor to give the floor to Dr. Tai Weijing from Beijing University. Dear Tai Weijing, the floor is yours, please. He will speak about competition for leadership, China and Russia in Eurasian integration.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sahakyan, for your introduction, moderating this panel, and organizing this conference, giving me the opportunity to share my research with colleagues from all around the world. I will start with the 3 keywords in my topic that will be Eurasia, leadership, China, and Russia. When we talk about Eurasia, it actually means different things to different countries. It may refer to the whole Eurasian continent, Europe and Asia, as our conference shows. Or it is a region between Western Europe and Eastern Asia, namely post-Soviet space. On some occasions, even Russia is not included in Eurasia. Taking this into consideration in my speech, Eurasia should be understood in the context. Well, great countries compete with each other at both global and regional levels. In Eurasian integration, they compete with each other as well. The roles of great powers in regional integration may be a leader, a provider of international public goods, a rulemaker and initiator of regional mechanisms, and a founding member of a new regional mechanism. Accordingly, small countries may play the role of a bandwagon goer, a free rider, a rule taker, a member of an observer state. Looking through this table, we will find out that leadership is the first and last thing the great powers pursued in regional integration. As the history of EU, NAFTA, EAU, and Belt and Road Initiative shows, great powers are leading in all integration mechanisms. Small countries may create their own sub-regional groups without participation of great powers, but such groups either could not stand against a regional organization led by regional power, or they chose to join a large group in the end. We will focus on the competition for leadership between China and Russia in Eurasian integration process, which are the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Belt and Road Initiative, and the Eurasian Economic Union. Russia has been acting as a leader in Eurasian integration. It adheres to 3 principles with other participants in the Eurasian region. Firstly, Russia considers its participation in the post-Soviet integration process indispensable, as is stated in its foreign policy concept. The priority is further strengthening the integration structures operating in the CIS with Russian participation. Russia treats integration groups without itself in different ways towards countries with an orientation on Europe, while respecting the right of its partners in the CIS to build relations with other international actors. Russia stands for the comprehensive fulfillment by the CIS member states of their obligations within the framework of regional integration structures with Russian participation. Examples of such principle are Russia's relations with the Organization of Central Asian Cooperation and the Guam. Secondly, Russia traditionally sees only post-Soviet states as the potential participants of Eurasian integration. The Russian version of Eurasian integration means the CIS, EAU, CSTO, and the Union State of Russia and Belarus. When describing the emerging Eurasian Union, it welcomes the accession to itself primarily of the CIS countries. The concept of Great Eurasia has changed the picture of Eurasia in the eye of Russia, and Russia willingly or unwillingly is beginning to recognize the participation of non-regional, ex-regional partners in Eurasian integration, such as China. Thirdly, by forming the EAEU, Russia's strategy is to gather small countries together, build a Eurasia as a new region, and bargain collectively as a group. In that way, its position in negotiations will improve, and it will gain the status of a leader and a representative of this region. Especially faced with the sanctions and the shrinking trading partners, Russia needs to stick together to keep warm. China, on the other hand, used to be only a standby of Eurasian integration, not a leader. But since the establishment of SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China has attached great importance to this newly founded organization and is trying to get the leadership status. Although at firstly together with Russia, as some experts pointed out, in the framework of SCO, the power structure was like a dual leadership by Russia and China together. But the situation turns more complicated when India and Pakistan join. China is in favor of regional economic integration within the framework of SCO. Specific proposals include a free trade area, a development fund, a special account, and the SCO development bank. But due to the decision-making process in SCO is on the basis of consensus, any veto will prevent these proposals to be realized. So China, of course, cannot decide alone. It must find another way to realize its plans. So after China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, it has a new platform and more resources to promote integration process in Eurasia. The result is that those proposals which China failed to realize within SCO have been implemented by other new mechanisms outside the SCO, such as the Silk Road Fund and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. At the same time, these new mechanisms covered most of the SCO member states. So China's solution is achieving cooperation through a net of bilateral and small multilateral mechanisms rather than regional arrangements. So this approach is more flexible and efficient. As the second largest economy in the world, it also has the strength to participate in various levels of economic cooperation. Relations between Russia and China in Eurasian integration will be like dominant power, that's Russia, and rising power, that's China. For China, the most realistic choice would be to work together with Russia and other countries in the region. It is also important for Russia to involve China in Eurasia. Offering public goods and maintaining a balance of power will benefit both sides. On the other hand, there will be partners and rivals at the same time. Although competition between Russia and China is inevitable in some sub-regions and several areas, but the prevailing trend will be their close interaction and in Eurasian integration, thanks to their close bilateral relations. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Weijing. And next, I want to introduce you Mr. Orazio Maria Gnerre, PhD student from University of Perugia, Italy. Dear Mr. Gnerre, please, the floor is yours. Thank you for your coming.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I want to take this opportunity to thank the organization of this important conference, the China-Eurasia Council for Political and Strategic Research, all the speakers and those present. The theme of my speech will be death of relations between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation in the last period. To talk about this, however, it is impossible for me not to mention the genesis of a renewed political and strategic bond, which must be traced back to the final phase of the Cold War. Relations between China and Russia can be investigated both in geopolitical deterministic terms and with a greater attention paid to actors, policies, and states intended as agents of interest and bearers of specific political concepts. In the first case, Sino-Russian relations could be considered since the dawn of time, and for reasons of time, this is not allowed in this conference to speak about it. In the second case, instead, we should compare the relationship between China and Russia as a geographical political heirs of the October Revolution, that event that marked the history of the 20th century as a watershed, continuing its effects until today. On the one hand, in fact, the People's Republic of China is today a country led by a communist party. On the other, the Russian Federation holds the deep political state identity left by the Soviet Union. The relations between the two countries during the Cold War experienced flawed phases, and this due to a different interpretation of the role of communism with respect to national issues. If on the one hand, the Soviet Union had developed with Stalin's thesis the principle of socialism in one country, according to which Russia should lead all people on the path of socialism, Mao's revolutionary China asserted the importance for each nation to develop an autonomous path towards independence and construction of its socio-economic system. These two visions produced a rift that saw the Eastern Bloc swing and redistribute its power until one of the two elements, the Soviet Union, imploded and had to reconstitute itself on other grounds. This did not happen to the People's Republic of China, which survived the Cold War, with the same institutional arrangements and the same state form. Paradoxically, the collapse of the Soviet Union produced an ever greater rapprochement between Russia and China under multiple strategic profiles. First of all, the redefinition of the economic system of the Russian Federation as conceptualized by Prime Minister Evgeny Primakov distanced the model of the new federation in a less distant sense from the new forms of Chinese market socialism, compared to the extremely centralized model of the Soviet Union and the completely anarchist one of Russia of Boris Yeltsin. Of course, this type of socio-economic organization based on the control of strategic sectors, on the state participation to large companies, and on the freedom of market for small and medium-sized enterprises was not dictated by the necessary transition to a communist society, as in the Chinese case. But we can see, basic convergence of some general aspects between the two systems. I mean, the Russian and the Chinese economical system. Secondly, the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, already after that the West redefined the political balance in the Balkans, became aware of the importance of a particular type of cooperation in terms of protection and defense, or of their common interests, including the formation of an international multipolar system. In this sense, the formation of the BRICS group should be read, in which the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China played an important role. This type of relationship took on an even more marked sense as diplomatic issues demonstrated the importance of multilateral cooperation, especially in the context of the new wars and regional crises that the post-Soviet world has brought with it, and which the world economic interrelation increased with the growth of volumes of international trade and the advancement of economic globalization. This type of interaction has reached peaks of particular importance with respect to the recent outbreak of the Syrian crisis, where the two powers have shown that they share the general vision of the question, both in terms of this international discussion, diplomatic discussion, and solutions. These last few years have confirmed the trend of China's economic rise, which is, however, followed by a whole series of issues and problems. The most important actor on a global level, which still holds the position of the first economy on the planet, the United States of America, acts according to an international doctrine that proposes its hegemonic role. The rise of China, which took place in a peaceful way, is seen by the United States of America as a risk to the unipolar hegemonic project of which it has made itself an advocate. And this has polluted the economic and diplomatic relations that were being woven between the two actors, who, in any case, did not deny the relations of a special nature that also existed between China itself and Russia. Moreover, the latter does not enjoy, especially in the last decade, I mean Russia, does not enjoy good relations with the United States and NATO, with which there is a long-term tug of war over the Western borders. This tightening of relations between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America has been brilliantly defined by China's President Xi Jinping as Thucydides' trap. This concept, which takes up Thucydides' narrative of the Peloponnesian War, which opposed the Greek city-states of Sparta and Athens, respectively a maritime and a terrestrial power, in the classic age, wants to mean as from a limitless clash, means the possibility of a limitless clash between two great powers who could more easily cooperate for the greater development of humanity. It is interesting how, in the concept of Thucydides' trap proposed by Xi Jinping, a double question arises, which unites Russia and China in its historical phase, namely that cooperation between states can simultaneously benefit each actor and promote its specific interests, in an area of limited competition, which will increase the collective well-being of humanity and which will take advantage of economic growth as well as greater technical scientific development and the safety of unstable areas of the globe. On the other hand, China has always tried to cooperate in these fields with the United States, from the dense economic exchanges to the joint military patrol of international waters in anti-piracy operations. We have said that the concept of international relations of the People's Republic of China hinges on the principle of multipolarity. This idea finds its foundations in various structures of thought that converge in the ideas, indeed, professed by the Chinese Communist Party. Among these are those of national liberation and self-determination of the peoples promoted by China during the Cold War, a lucid and realistic vision of national interests in the face against a Western-style interventionist idealism, and the principle of multilateral cooperation of the components of humanity in a peaceful system, as supported by the communist principle of proletarian internationalism. On this issue, the People's Republic of China is united with the international politics of the Russian Federation. The question of multipolar order of planet Earth was immediately posed by the political personalities of the new post-Soviet Russia in relation to a renewed vision of the national question that undermined the perverse industrial, military, and economic competition that had arisen with the bipolar confrontation. In this sense, the political aims of the two Russian and Chinese powers tended to converge from the beginning. To date, these two countries are staunch defenders of this approach and this model of international politics, followed by state formations that are both advanced and receding in terms of power and economic reach. However, following the intensification of disagreement between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America, relations between these two countries have become even more cemented. The turnaround and the attempt to establish decoupling between the US system and the China system began to take shape with the Trump presidency, during which the strategic focus of the United States shifted from Moscow to Beijing and the South China Sea. Not only this, but Donald Trump has often spoken, as president of the US, of the importance of redefining the structure and scope of the international market, which China was taking too much advantage of. Xi Jinping's Davos speech of 2017 must in fact be read in comparison with this general orientation that was formed in the US. During this speech, Xi Jinping underlined how the international market and economic globalization can be a positive vector of collective growth if kept within a frame of international order, predictability of the choices of the actors, and political control of states over economic phenomena, over centrifugal economic phenomena. The last
2
political...
minutes, please. 2 minutes.
Okay, just to jump to conclusion. This situation brought China and Russia to closer political and economical ties. And then those are the conclusion. In the economic field, the General Administration of Customs of the People's Republic of China recorded an annual increase of 29.5% in economic exchanges with the Russian Federation, characterizing them especially in the areas of the digital economy, green trade, and healthcare. This also confirms a long-standing trend, which is the cooperation between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China in research and development. China is currently the first trading partner of the Russian Federation, and the latter continues to supply large quantities of oil to the Asian country, despite the latter having a policy of differentiating its suppliers. The commercial and infrastructural project of the Beijing New Silk Road itself is well received and promoted by the Russian Federation. In a recent speech, Vladimir Putin said that it is obvious that the large-scale implementation of the New Silk Road promoted by our Chinese colleagues is intended to strengthen the cooperation of the states of Eurasia. In the middle of the pandemic period, just this year, in September, the joint military exercise between the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, Iran, Pakistan, Myanmar, Armenia, and Belarus was also held. This kind of exercises extend what was previously the framework of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the sphere of international security and the establishment of a common military front of collaboration. The intensification of joint exercises between Russia and China and the joint patrolling of the Asia-Pacific region, maritime region, cause analysts to speak more and more of a de facto military alliance between the two countries. So the conclusions. Within what was called the last year, the New Cold War, the so-called New Cold War, and which incidentally presents many differences, of course, with what was the original Cold War. It would have been impossible for the ties between Russia and China not to accelerate in their conjunction. However, this must not deceive us with respect to their nature, the nature of this alliance, which does not concern medium-term objectives and purely opportunistic ones, but is part of a longer-term process of integration, of course, and with reasons that have reasons that have their roots in the development of the political consciousness, geopolitical consciousness of the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gnerre. And the next speaker is Dr. Vishal Kumar Baswal from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Dear Dr. Baswal, the floor is yours, please.
First of all, thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. The topic of my presentation is the role of India, China, and Russia in emerging world order. So I have divided my topic into 4 or 5 parts, and I will deal first with introduction, then present global order, means how the today's world order looks like, and then Asian century. 4th point is cooperation among these 3 countries, and last, future prospects. So first, I will deal with introduction. As you know, the contemporary world is full of uncertainty, unpredictability, and insecurity. The non-traditional security threats are on the high, such as terrorism, lethal diseases, climate change, etc. Therefore, it is important for countries to protect their national boundaries and interests. However, on the other side, it is also important that while maintaining national interest, countries should keep in mind their ethics and moral towards other nations. It is clear that today's world is multipolar world. There are numerous states which are playing significant role in the contemporary world order. Some of the powers such as India, Russia, and China are powers which has greater role in the world and also has responsibility to shape the world order. As it has been noticed from the last few years that world is witnessing various changes in the interactions of states. It becomes more important to know that how these 3 powers are interacting to each other in the given world order and how will it shape the world order in the coming years. India's relationships with its neighbor countries and China's involvement in the region complicates the relations between China and Russia. India's closeness to United States also makes relations very difficult with the Russia and China as well. On the other hand, as some of states assumes that China is responsible for the recently emerged coronavirus, makes China very uncomfortable in engaging with old friends such as Russia and also other countries. These are some of the complexities in the relationship of the state which are important to understand for the today's world order. Next point is present global order, means how the present global order looks like. The world is adrift today. Sorry. We are neither in a bipolar world, Cold War, nor in a multipolar world, though perhaps leading, tending towards a world of several power centers. We are in a world between orders. The lack of a coherent international response to COVID-19 pandemic is proof of an absence of international order and of the ineffectiveness of multilateral institutions. So is the ineffective international response to climate change and other translational threats. A retreat from globalization, the regionalization of trade and shifting balance of power, the rise of China and others, and structural China-US strategic rivalry have shifted the geopolitical and economic centers of gravity from the Atlantic to Asia. Inequality between and within state has bred a narrow nationalism and parochialism. We are entering a polarized information age and face ecological crisis of the Anthropocene, making climate change an existential threat. And next point is Asian century, how this 21st century means Asian century. Over the next decade, it is expected that Asia will remain the cockpit of geopolitical rivalries and that the US remains the most formidable power, though its relative power is declining. China sees a window of opportunity but acts in a hurry, suggesting that it believes that window may close or it is already closing due to pushback from the West and others. China's crowded geographic constraints is both on land and at the sea. It is expected that her profile and power will continue expanding. The result is likely continued friction, some cooperation, and quasi-adversarial relations. India and China, which other will take advantage of as neighbors, and in the present situation, mix of confrontation and cooperation is likely to continue to mark India's relation with China. And last, overall conventional conflict between the great powers in Asia may not be reality, but other forms and level of violence and contention in the international system will rise. And how these three powers means Russia and China and India are cooperating. There are some imbalances and balance in the bilateral relationship of these countries, but Russian, Chinese, and Indian policymakers have looked to try bilateral and especially multilateral structure to mediate differences and develop new opportunities for cooperation. Just in the past few years, there has been an extraordinary proliferation of international, regional, and sub-regional organization. In addition to existing institutions such as APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Grouping, the East Asian Summit, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, the RIC, Russia and China framework, we have seen the emergence of G20, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, the Eurasian Economic Union, and the OBOR, means World Bank World Round Initiative. So last and final point is what is the conclusion and future prospects. The uncertainty and changing geopolitical environment clearly pose considerable challenge to world order. The original conception of the trilateral framework was on attempt to manage the US unipolarity and ensure greater regional and international stability after the end of the Cold War. There are serious debates whether the circumstances that gave rise to this grouping exist or not. With the world fast becoming multipolar, both India and Russia have their own dynamics in their bilateral ties with China. Russia is getting closer to China, or as balancing against the US seems to be their preferred priority. On the contrary, sensing the futility of its attempt to balance China's might with the combined Indo-Russian efforts, India is trying to engage with multiple partners. The strategic utility of the New Delhi, Moscow, Beijing trilateral may have got reduced as far as India is concerned. That does not mean diminishing prospect of India-Russia bilateral relations. India-China boundary dispute and China's frequent incursion into the territory claimed by India have kept New Delhi on the tenterhooks. China is placed in a stronger position vis-a-vis both Russia and India. Thank you so much. This was my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Baswal. And we are.
Thank you, sir.
I want to provide floor to Dr. Junuguru Srinivas from Gitam University, India. Please, the floor is yours.
Let me extend my great sense of gratitude for accepting my proposal during this conference. Thank you so much once again. Okay, so I'm going to present on the topic called China and India view on emerging global order, a comparative analysis. So my framework of the presentation is introduction, methodology, and scope of the study, background, India-China relations. India-China relations, India view on global order, China view on global order, comparative analysis, and the conclusion. So introduction, we are living in a very complicated global affairs today. World politics are rapidly changing. Western supremacy in international relations is depleting every day. The transatlantic dominant world economic system and liberal global order being transformed with global south countries like China, India, Brazil, and several other countries. Remarkably, China's rise is one of the largest global economies, and China's footprints in the global economy made fathom China's role in the emerging international order. Likewise, China's neighbor, India's economic growth and its strength causing alarming bells for the global north to maneuver its foreign policy in emerging international politics. So currently, two Asian giants are working on the same projects to become global powers. However, the question that arises is how these two countries are viewing the rapidly changing international politics. What exactly do China and India want to do in present international relations? Whether these two countries want to be part of the existing global governance structure dominated by the US-led transatlantic order, or these two countries cooperate or follow an antagonistic attitude with the global north? If so, then how would this conflict affect international politics? If not, then can India and China grow together? If so, then on what condition? These are the very critical questions to be answered by the time. So there is much discourse on the India-China bilateral clashes. However, there is a dearth of literature on India-China views and the global relations. So the research paper explores China and India's perspective on a global order. So the methodology I used are basically descriptive and analytical because based on the secondary data, I analyzed my assessment on the topic, and there is a lot of scope for this issue because there is a lot of literature on India-China bilateral relation as well as their trade, geographical clashes. But then there is a depth of literature on the their perspective on global order and their role and all stuff. So the background, it has been more than 70 years that we are living in a transatlantic architecture of international relations. From the post-war period of global politics to till a recent past, the global politics have been dominated by the UN, IMF, World Bank, and several other global organizations. The West has created these global organizations to promote peace, stability, economic prosperity, and tranquility in international relations. Thus, it is more of a Western global order to prevail in international relation. However, the success of this global order has created its existential challenge. We know that India and China indeed have a checkered history. However, it is openly evident that India-China relations are elements of cooperation, competition, and potentially conflict. So as we see in October 2019, when Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi stressed the cooperative aspects in the relationship for which both the countries have been affirming in regular intervals. But we had witnessed the Doklam issue and Galwan Valley problems in quick succession. That shows how precarious are India and China relation. But when it comes to global order, both India and China want to reform the existing international order. However, their perspective seems to be a far different concern in the current global order. Okay, so now let me talk about India-China bilateral relation. Then I'll straight away move to their approach on global order. So the India-China relations have always oscillated between friendship and competition. However, some semi-institutional changes took place, which played a significant role in engaging each other in international affairs. For example, India-China's strategic cooperative partnership for peace and prosperity in 2005, the strategic economic dialogue started in 2011, and the border defense cooperation agreement. Okay, so the research paper highlights significant happenings of India and China relation from the 1950s onward, but that will be there in the paper, not here. Okay, the primary emphasis would be on India and China perspective on global order. For the first time on April 1950, India became the non-socialist bloc country, established diplomatic relation with China. Since then, the relation built based on the principle of mutual coexistence. But then the major incident took place between India and China on April 29, 1954, when Jawaharlal visited India on June 20. 1954, the critical 5 principles have been confirmed and a joint communique issued by the Jawaharlal Nehru and China, and these are the core points of India-China relation from then onwards. But after 1962, the structure of international India-China relation have been completely changed. There was a hiatus between India and China growth till 1991 before Rajiv Gandhi went to China for a positive relation between India and China relations, and since then the misconception between China and India is going on till today. So then what is India's approach on present global order? The old order constructed both political and economic institutions. There were the United Nations Organization established in 1944 to manage political and security matters. The UN Security Council had 5 veto willing members that we know: US, USSR, present day Russia, UK, France.
2 minutes.
Other.
2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so basically at the time, India was a colony struggling for independence from the British, and its economy was a meager $30 billion as compared to that of the US 300 billion. So basically, India was not in a position to talk about global order in the beginning. But today, India became the 6th largest global economy, one of the largest contributing country to the UN peacekeeping forces, and more than US of 642 billion foreign exchange just are there. And that is a way, since India has a lot of resources to claim for a global role in international relations, that is a way we're demanding for international institutional structure of global order, like reforming the UNSC, IMF, World Bank, and WTO, so that global South concerns can be reflected in global affairs. And India is also active member of several BRICS global organizations like BRIC, G4, SCO, G20, and all these countries are asking for reform global order. And so now let me a little bit talk about China's approach on global order. China was briefly recognized as a founding member of the UN Security Council. We know that the Chinese economy has grown at an average of 10% per year, raising per capita GDP almost 49-fold from 155 to nearly. Okay, so basically, China's approach towards reforming a global order is basically very confusing, because sometimes they are saying that they are a progressive country, they want only reform and they don't want to overthrow the existing international relation. But the kind of change that it is bringing, it's basically giving us a suspicious attitude of China. Okay, and their role is immense in the present global order, because it became the largest global economy, increasing contribution to the UN budget, and it has established AAB, BRICS Development Bank, increasing China's force in the UN peacekeeping force, Belt and Initiative. Several scholars have spoke about that one. So in the concluding remarks, India and China wants to reform the global order. Both are active members of the BRICS, G20, SCO, and seriously calling for reforming global order. But both India and China indeed have scores of differences on various bilateral and multilateral aspects of international relations. For China, India is one of the annoying partners in its neighborhood. Scholar Kadira termed India as a conditional threat to China, as India's foreign policy tilting towards the US is always an aggravating factor for China's foreign policy maker. China believes that India will cooperate with the US in containing China's role in international relations. At the same time, India considered China a threat to its national security and India's role in international relations. China never supported India's membership in the NSC, and China was not okay with India joining the nuclear suppliers group. Further, China never say to Pakistan attitude towards India's prominent factor for the growing gulf between India and China. So therefore, though they are together on various regional and global organizations, unless or until both the countries do not enhance confidence building measures and cooperate not only through words but through action, then only we can expect a positive outcome of the India-China cooperation in relation. Therefore, the emerging global order is very complex. That time only is the answer for it. Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity once again.
You are welcome. We are happy that you and our colleagues from India joined this conference. And I want to stay in India. We are still in India. We are going from Gitam University to Jawaharlal Nehru University. And we are providing the floor to Dr. Prashanta Kumar Suha. Please, Dr. Sahu. Sorry, Sahu.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you, sir, giving me the opportunity. I'm going to talk about India-Russia relation and the emerging geopolitics in Eurasia. This paper would assess the strategic environment in Eurasia and the position of India-Russia relation within this arena. It would discuss the issue primarily energy in the Caspian region, which has led to crisis and competition among the major powers under the auspicious Great Game and energy diplomacy. India has shown interest in the region but faces intense competitions from its other Asian player in this region, that is China. The crux of Indo-Russia relation also lies in the compatibility of their geopolitical and strategic interests at their regional level, Central Asia and Central Eurasia. Now I'm going to present main topics in introduction. Eurasia comprising of the 5 Central Asian republics and 8 states of South Caucasus, which have emerged as independent sovereign political entity in the post-Soviet space. The geopolitical significance of this region and also make the proximity of both Russia and India to this region an important determinants of their bilateral relation. The geostrategic location of the Central Asian state has made this region extremely pivotal. Central Asia regions lies at the crossroads of Russia and Russia, Middle East, South Asia, and the Far East. Post-Cold War geopolitics has been characterized by unipolar military power and global economic tripolarity, like North America, European Union, and East Asia. There has been competition over access to natural resources, and foreign policy has been molded to discover new strategy to secure energy supply. The Central Asian region and the Caspian region are home to vast oil and gas region. This has turned the region into a intersection of interstate rivalry, enterprises competition, and intervention by major power of non-state actors. Apart from vast oil and gas reserve in Central Asia region, there are also the cheap hydro energy reserve. This has attracted the attention of various countries, including India. In fact, today, Central Asia has become a critical area in the foreign policy of the West, South, and East Asian country. The US has provided a new direction to cementing a new partnership with some of these former Soviet republics. Russia itself is trying to build a neo-cooperative framework of China, is no exception of this trend. India is making a serious bid to forge neo-equipment with country in Central Asia. Countries like Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and Pakistan are also making efforts to create a position of influence in this region. India, as an emerging regional power in South Asia, is naturally interested in any changes occurring within a close to the region, which may have implications for its security. The issue of geoeconomics are inextricably linked with the issue of geopolitics in Eurasia. Most significantly, Central Asia is the only region in the world where the impact of four nuclear powers came into play: Russia, China, Pakistan, and India. Though various issues engulfing the sensitive Eurasian region, including the exploitation of the resources, ethno-political conflict, the problem involved in oil and gas transit routes, link with world market, and the region critically secure aspects. Major theme clearly emerge concerning the role of interested actors, both major and minor, in the complex mosaic of Eurasia. The decline of Russia and the ascendancy of the West, China growing presence, rule of Afghanistan in Pakistan, India as a keen observer, Chechnya as the first real post-imperialist Russian challenge, Japan and South Korea as interested party, and Israel as a potential newcomer. And the end of Cold War and the break of the Soviet Union in 1991 lead to paradigmatic shift in the international relation arena. However, the past friendship between Russia and India was evolved into a strategic partnership today. Generally, it has been observed that whenever the geopolitical and strategic interest of two countries coincide, the ensuing relationship between them is often warm, close, and friendly. The crux of Indo-Russia relation also lie in the compatibility of their vital interests at the regional level. Central Asia and the Central Eurasia, and the Central Asia, the center of Eurasia. It was this compatibility of geopolitical and geostrategic interests that worked well for Indo-Soviet tie in the past and augur well now for Indo-Russia tie. The regional scenario of Eurasia has been in a state of constant flux due to external intervention for control over its natural resources and efforts to provide alternative transport route and corridor to most of the landlocked country of the region, and the propagation of forced democracy in the post-Soviet space. There are the various dimensions of the competition that has emerged among the major powers. It is primarily between the West, particularly the US, on one hand, and Russia in partnership with China on the other hand, competing for control and influence in Eurasia. For Indo-Russia relation, the regional context presents not only new challenges to their relationship, but new opportunity as well. In order to analyze India relation with Russia, on examining of the strategic environment in Eurasia is necessary. And
Last minute,
India,
Dr. Sahu.
Okay, sir. Okay. The economically of the commonality of Russia and India geopolitical interest has proved the way of the relationship to become strong and stable on the issue of religion and religious extremism and terrorism. India and Russia sharply many commonalities are the source of tension, funding, training, etc. India and Russia want a secular Central Asia working towards a democratic setup. Saying the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia, India could play an effective role in some of the regional grouping active here to address the issue of concern. India has a rich experience in multilateral diplomacy. It has been the founder of the non-aligned movements and also the member of G70, South-South cooperation, also, etc. Also, India experience in combating terrorism, extremism, and separatism would be useful. The CSTO, a Rosa initiative, is also emerging as an active grouping in this region, through its impact seem rather green. Now I'm going to my conclusion chapter. While Rosa is already a power in the Eurasia region to be reckoned with, the entry of India is a major way. Will likely hold the three countries, India, Russia, and China, to further strengthen mutual trade and commerce relations with wider implications for the region. Mutual cooperation between these three countries will further widen the discussion on multilateralism with the strengthening of the Russia, India, and China, and Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa BRICS framework. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Thank you. Actually, our panel is about Russia, China, India, triangle territorial dispute in South China Sea. I have been in Russia, China, in South China Sea, so I need to come to India as well. Looking forward that we pass this problem with COVID-19 and
yeah, welcome, most welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Most welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
And the next, I'm going to Russia, and I want to provide the floor to Dr. Alexander Korolev, Associate Professor, Deputy Head of the Center of Comprehensive European and International Studies at National Research University, High School of Economics. Alexander Korolev is also in advisory board of this conference, academic council member. So Alexander, it is already the second time that you are participating in China-Russia conference. So you are welcome, please, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear colleagues, and thank you, DM Gnerre. So I'm very delightful to speak at this conference and see many colleagues and our respected in all the ways organize and moderate DM Gnerre. So yeah, my intervention will be devoted to the political and economic security architecture in Eurasia, or it's how we in Russia, in Armenia, in many other countries, we do call it the Great Eurasia or Great Eurasia Partnership. And my speech will be more practical and theoretical one. So I will just try to squeeze the English School of International Relations and specifically the international society concept provided by Hadley Bull and Charles Manning and many other scholars to analyzing of major political and economic processes across the Great Eurasia. Of course, the process of a Great Eurasia is so vast territory in geopolitical, geoeconomic meanings. So I will try to use the two major cases. One case is trade and sanctions war, or we can call it combined. We can call it collectively the offensive protectionism. And the other is the pandemic or COVID-19. But I will focus on the COVID-19 not as the epidemiological factor, but as the trigger towards the decreasing of the relationship between the great powers and actually the many states. So, and as for the subjects of this analysis, it will be major actors in the Great Eurasia. So it will be China, definitely. It will be India. It will be Iran, it will be European Union, ASEAN, and the Eurasian Economic Union. So I put Russia in the Eurasian Economic Union collectively. So what we see from this analysis and from the national society framework, so the very English School of IR, the very international society framework clearly shows us that there are several major instruments or institutions for the analysis, or elements of which makes the international society the real international society per se. This is sovereignty, this is balance of power, this is diplomacy, this is trade, this is common recognition. So, and we now try to put all these institutions, all these major elements to these cases of major actors in Great Eurasia, and these two major cases: offensive protectionism, sanctions and trade war, and the pandemic COVID-19. What do we see from the offensive protectionist perspective? So we definitely see one of the major analytical results of my research is that we actually cannot say that we already see the established international society in Great Eurasia in terms of the trade and in terms of the trade. Why? Because we all know that the protectionism and the so-called the sanctions and the trade wars, they come across many countries. We see how the European Union is imposing these sanctions against Iran, right? We see how actually China is also using the coercion instruments of trade coercion instruments or sanctions against some countries, for example, some countries of Southeast Asia. We also see the sanctions and trade war between, for example, China and the European Union, or European Union and Russia. This is the first thing that there is. We see the lack of diplomatic resources. We see the lack of diplomacy across the Great Eurasia in terms of not imposing the sanctions and the unilateral restrictive measures. The second option, the second tool, is the common recognition. Here we can say that definitely the majority of the Great Eurasian partners do recognize themselves, right? Do recognize as the whole entity, as the new unit in the international relations. But at the same time, we can say that if we're talking about European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, they do have cooperation, definitely. But in terms of institutionally, still the European Union does not recognize Eurasian Economic Union as the entity, right? So this is definitely due to the anti-Russian sanctions and position of Russia in the Eurasian Economic Union, that the European Union thinks that is too vulnerable to trade, too vulnerable and too dangerous actually for the political sensitive issues to develop the institutional relationship framework with Eurasian Economic Union. The other part is the common interest. Can we really say that the Great Eurasian Partnership really have the common interest? We have so many different diverse countries. China, Iran, Eurasian Economic Union, European Union, and all the difference and all the interests are really different. And the last part from this is the balance of power. So once again, we can definitely for sure say that we do see the problem of the balance of power in Great Eurasia. For example, the aggregated capabilities, the capacity and the resources of countries like China, much more developed and much more predominant than the relative power of countries like, for example, Iran, or separate countries of Eurasian Economic Union. Then, if we're talking about the balance of power inside different organizations like Eurasian Economic Union, we also can say that there is no balance of power in the Eurasian Economic Union, because from the economic perspective and political, geopolitical perspective, Russia is more developed than other Eurasian Economic Union partners. The same way with ASEAN. We know that we have, for example, Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, or Malaysia, actually huge countries, the middle powers for the ASEAN, for the Southeast Asian perspective. But at the same time, we see a lot of less developed countries like Myanmar, Brunei, or Laos, or Cambodia. So we also see that we do face the lack of balance of power, and the power is really diverse, and we do see the asymmetry of power across the specific regional trade blocks like ASEAN or Eurasian Economic Union or European Union as well, and the Great Eurasia as well. And the second part of my paper is the COVID-19 and the pandemic. Once again, not as the epidemiological factor, but as the trigger for the decreasing of the relationship between the states. We also see that one of the major elements of the international society concept is the is the diplomacy and the cooperation in resolving the majority of issues. And the COVID-19 is definitely the common issue for the majority of Great Eurasian partners. And what do we see? We see the huge cooperation, really tense cooperation, a very positive cooperation against the COVID-19 between specific member states of the Greater Eurasian Partnership, for example, ASEAN and China, or European Union and ASEAN. It's really cooperative. It's really a very fruitful cooperation. At the same time, we don't see real positive cooperation between Iran and European Union due to the fighting of the COVID-19. Moreover, for example, European Union just blamed China and Iran for cheating with the WHO system and cheating with the statistics, manipulation with the statistics. So we also see that the real cooperation between specific partners like Iran and the European Union is not that developed and is decreasing during the COVID-19. The same way, I already mentioned that the European Union does not recognize Eurasian Economic Union as the legal entity. So that's why the question of relationship to fight against COVID-19 during the pandemic for European Union and for Eurasian Economic Union, the cooperation is not really developed. As for the other participants of Greater Eurasian Partnership, for example, ASEAN and Eurasian Economic Union, the relationship to fight COVID-19 is also very vague, right? It's not that developed comparing, for example, with China and the Eurasian Economic Union. So just going to the major results, we can say, according to the analysis of these major actors in Greater Eurasia, so Iran, India, ASEAN, Eurasian Economic Union, European Union, and China, and for two major cases, the pandemic, COVID-19, and the offensive realism, offensive protectionism, which is sanctions and trade war, we can say that we really don't have the established international society in Greater Eurasia. It's just only in its infancy. It's just developing, but right now it's very hard to call it the real international society because it runs counter the major elements of the theoretical English school of IR basis. So it's diplomacy, balance of power, common interests, sovereignty, diplomacy, international law, and the common recognition and trade, which is also very asymmetric across the Eurasian space. So thank you once again. Yeah.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you very much. Hopefully next year we will not have this problem with COVID and we will be in Yerevan once again.
Sure. Yeah, with pleasure.
And dear friends, let's take our virtual tickets and fly from beautiful Moscow to wonderful Shanghai, where my colleague, my classmate, Dr. Taiyulong, together we studied at Nanjing University. Now he's at Shanghai Tech University, and he will speak about Malaysia's flexible nail role in solving its territorial disputes with Asian neighbors. Dear friend, dear Taiyulong, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. My name is Taiyulong. I now work at the Office of International Affairs at Shanghai University, Shanghai Tech University, and today I'm going to speak about Malaysia's flexible nail role in solving its territorial disputes with Asian neighbors. And in the past, there are many researches on Southeast Asian territorial disputes, including the South China Sea dispute. And among the researchers, there are studies on Malaysia's territorial dispute with its neighbors, including some single case study, or two or more multiple cases studies, or and also there are studies focusing on the quiet diplomacy of Malaysia mainly on the South China Sea dispute. And in the Southeast Asian region, the regional political structure this year has been changing greatly, and some political events with profound impacts have taken place there. For example, the Sino-US maritime confrontations in 2016, and also China's keeping China's reclamation and increasing maritime law enforcement as well as military presence in this region. And there are four cases I'm going to study in this research, including territorial disputes with Malaysia's four neighbors, Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, and Vietnam. And this first case was resolved by the International Court of Justice in 2002. Both Malaysia and Indonesia claimed their sovereignty over two small uninhabitable coral reef islands at the northeast coast of Borneo Island. In the end of the arbitration, the ICJ awarded the sovereignty to Malaysia for its long-term effective control over the two islands. And the second case was resolved in 2008 by the International Court of Justice. Both Malaysia and Singapore claimed the sovereignty over two uninhabitable granite island and the low tide elevation at the east entrance of the Strait of Singapore. In the end, one of the islands named Petrobranca was awarded to Singapore, and the other one named Middle Rocks was awarded to Malaysia, and the rest one, the low tide elevation named South Lish, was to be decided. The disputed territory that Malaysia and Brunei claimed included two parts: land territory named Limbang Division and its contiguous maritime demarcation. The U-shaped territory of the Limbang has divided the Brunei into two parts and made it more complicated to define the relative maritime limits, especially the Brunei Bay, connecting two parts of Brunei and the west wing of Limbang. As to the maritime delimitation, both Brunei and Malaysia claim were based on orders of the former British colonists, clauses of, and also British colonists, and also clauses of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And most of the disputed maritime area are inside the 9-dash line of China. And in the end, Malaysia ceded all disputed maritime area to Brunei in exchange of the latter giving up its claim over Limbang, and as well as settling one region as the joint oil exploitation area in the South China Sea. And the fourth case is a little bit special. The bilateral agreement and the joint submission to the UN made by Malaysia and Vietnam was rejected by all other parties in the South China Sea dispute by written notes. The area mentioned in the joint submission by the two states is in the center area of limits of continental shelves claimed by Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. I think Malaysia's role in these disputes can be defined as a flexible nail. In each dispute, Malaysia set a bottom line of principles and firmly insisted on its basic interest and intended to resolve the dispute in a low-profile manner. This bottom line derived from treaties, agreements, or former suzerain states' internal provisions. Malaysia's handling of disputes in a comparatively low profile was dominated by its quiet diplomacy intention, which was not as high profile as Vietnam or the Philippines in their disputes, but it was significantly higher than Brunei. This was because Malaysia hoped to avoid its policy options being constrained by domestic public opinion and political environment. However, it would prevent this dispute from being cooled down and shelved in the settlement process through diplomatic and media means in a certain degree, such as notes, announcements, and the disclosure of some information to the media. Malaysia will not take the initiative to use tough measures such as military confrontation or conflict to forcibly gain negotiation advantage. But if the opponent state adopted such a strategy, it will use low-intensity military means to deal with the latter. In this process, Malaysia would still seek to compromise with the opponent and cool the situation. If Malaysia's claim to certain part of disputed territory has only a comparatively weaker advantage, it will compromise with the opponent in order to promote the latter's concessions in other aspects and achieve phased result by negotiation. And if they failed, they will seek international arbitration. There are two kinds of factors that influence Malaysia's behaviors in disputes that are in international law and of political security and economic variables. Clauses of international treaties like the UN conventions and as well as principles of customary international law provided international law support for Malaysia's claim. On the other hand, some of Malaysia's claims were also based on Great Britain and other European powers provisions or arrangements in the colonist era. As to the kind of factors, the complicated international environment in Southeast Asian region, the eager to develop economy, and the desire to maintain a comparative stable domestic political and social environment together shaped Malaysia's policy choices. And Malaysia's achievement in resolving its territory disputes unquestionably provides a reference of peaceful and successful settlement together to other disputes in this region. And in these cases, Malaysia showed bilateral settlements is more practical. It never adopted the way of multilateral settlement. Besides, it even avoided multilateral way in some of these cases, especially cases concerning the maritime demarcation. International law is inevitably a good means for small and medium-sized states like Malaysia to seek their interests, but it is not an all-powerful tool to resolve disputes. These states still need to rely on their own efforts first. Part of Malaysia's settlement ignored China's claim and interest in the South China Sea dispute, making it more complicated and less conducive to be resolved, and more difficult for China to resolve this world-class problem. And that's my speech. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Talon. Thank you. And we are going to Q&A session. And I have one question for our participants from India. You can answer. You can choose who will answer, or you can answer all. So India is standing one of the main players in Eurasian continent. Before COVID-19, its economy was growing very fast, and hopefully in the future, Indian economy will be recovered. So it is true that on the other hand, India has many problems with the China, and the US is trying to use this moment. But of course, India also has great trade with China, and with China, India is in BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And of course, on the one hand, the US is trying to take India and invite, the US is inviting India to its camp. And on the other hand, Russia is trying to keep India in BRICS, RIC, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and it is trying to make some borders with China and India. China is also understanding that India is a very important player and trying to create harmonized relations with India. But what do you think if there be a conflict between China and the US? Which side will turn India in the final stage?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. At the outset, let me clear that due to the pandemic, not only India, most of the countries in the world got affected politically, socially, culturally. in various aspects. And economically, it was a complete devastation on the global economy. But the day before yesterday, Indian government clearly said that 2021, their annual GDP is around 8, sir. That means a kind of recovery. Okay. In fact, IMF, World Bank also predicting positively about the growth of India's economy. So slowly, things are getting on track. Let's hope that it will continue. And with regard to India and Russia relations, some 10-15 days back, India actually has sent, Russia has sent its S-400 missile to India, which was which was supposed to be sent to India. So things are actually, the strategic cooperation between India and China, Russia is going smoother, and it will be smoother because this friendship is not the recent past. It has its own history. And when it comes to the conflict between China and US, actually, my understanding is that India will maintain its strategic autonomy, sir. Yes, India is actually appears to be tilting towards US, but at the same time, India has its own limitations while dealing with USA. Because when it comes to CARTSA, when we India bought S-400 missile from Russia, American policymaker they said that India may fall under CARTSA, countering strategic. There is, I don't know the exact full form. If one country falls under that CARTSA, there will be a lot of limitation on dealing with America. Okay, so it's not that India completely tilting towards the US. Rather, India is trying to maintain its strategic balance. For India, America is also important, Russia is also important. At the same time, India also know that India needs China's friendship. At the same time, China also know that India's role is very important in enhancing China's international role, because when you see AIB, India is the second largest contributor in AIB, which was formed by the China. So India's relation with China is basically situational, issue by issue. India is cooperating with China in SCO, BRICS, and several other countries. So for me, I think when, if at all there is a conflict between these global powers, I think India will maintain strategic autonomy, which has been maintaining since our independence in the form of non-alignment. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. And I have a question for Dr. Korolev. The Greater Eurasian Partnership Project is a very constructive idea, and it can solve many problems in Eurasian continent. While the building blocks for Greater Eurasian Partnership projects are in place, it is not so clear which states or institutions should finance them. For instance, for Belt and Road Initiative, China is financing that. It has founded also Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So which kind of bank or institution or maybe country must finance this? Because we know without finance, it is not possible to do this huge project. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for a question. Yes, it's really interesting that in even in many countries, even in Russia, there is a debate whether the Great Eurasian Partnership should be only the set of different economic projects, right, or the cooperation with Belt and Road Initiative, or it should be more complex security political architecture process. So this is, very debatable question. And as for the economic institutions or banks, so I think the central role in the economic architecture in Great Eurasia should take place and should play the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese initiative, and specifically the Silk Road Fund, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Eurasian Development Bank, and the Eurasian Economic Commission, which functions under the Eurasian Economic Union. So, and this idea of the conjuncture between the Eurasian Economic Union, the integration project, and the Belt and Road Initiative, and definitely ASEAN, which is also should be a huge part of that. The RCP, right? The new let's say part of the let's say architecture in a broader sense, and still European Union, right? So definitely the Greater Eurasian Partnership should consist of European Union. And as for if we're talking about more deeply in terms of Greater Eurasian Partnership in not only economic, but let's say political and economic, meaning so Shanghai Cooperation Organization with India, with China should also, of course, be represented in this entity.
Thank you very much.